As
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Cafe podcast. Today I'm joined with Robert Maxwell. Robert is the CEO of TGT Solutions, a systems integrator he's led for nearly 3 decades, working across business intelligence, data management, and IT infrastructure for small and mid-sized businesses. Robert's sharpest point is the one he's made on other shows, is that for a small business, a cyber incident isn't a real technical event. It's cash, it's trust, and it's a continuity event. A single compromised credential or one phishing email can undo years of work in minutes. Robert, welcome to the cafe.
Thank you, sir.
So you've run TGT for almost 30 years across, you've done CRM systems, business intelligence, data management, infrastructure. Where does cybersecurity actually sit in your broader practice?
At the moment, it sits front and center because our philosophical disposition is you can do all of these wonderful things, but if you don't have security, it's for naught.
So, so what kind of risks are you seeing, and how has that changed over the course of 30 years?
We see leadership risks because leadership tends not to fully appreciate just how at risk they are. We see continuity risks because people somehow don't fathom that once you're hit, it's very difficult to continue or to survive. That's the big risk that we see.
Okay. And is it tricky to kind of negotiate that with an SME owner rather than, say, an enterprise?
It's much more difficult to negotiate and explain that to an SME owner because the prevailing belief tends to be we're too small to be hit. It doesn't matter. We'll survive anyway. They have a more dismissive attitude because they're less appreciative of the risks. Whether you're dealing with a small financial firm, because the person practices as a sole practitioner, you're dealing with somebody who specializes in a trade, they emphasize what they do, the quality of their work, and they're less focused around the risks that are associated with cyber.
So you're seeing it across all sorts of industries then.
Oh, yes.
Interesting.
Especially smaller financial institutions where brokers is a great example. Many brokers don't fully appreciate why they need to be caring about this.
So the regulations or the compliance requirements has not been enough for them
No,
to kind of feel
no,
understood. Okay.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
If you will allow me, I'll tell you a small story.
Let's dig into that here.
So we were in the middle of an assessment call because we always start with an assessment of where the organization is. We're in the middle of an assessment call, and the leader of the business, just asks us to hold for 1 sec. Somebody whispers in his ear. He comes back online and he says, "We're being hacked." And that's it. This never happened to us before. So we mobilize everything to get into their system. We're still in the evaluation stage and getting to know them, but they trust us. They give us the credentials and we prevent the hack. But the prevailing attitude, he said it because why is this happening to us? We were too small to be hacked. You hear it all the time.
Yeah. So even after the fact, they were almost
Incredulous.
yeah.
Why is it? Why us?
Yeah.
You may have information for a couple of hundred, if not a couple of thousand people. That's a good reason to hack you.
Well, half the time they don't even know that they have the information until they can get their hands on it either, right? So you've spoken elsewhere about trust building and your projects. Kind of tell me about your experience in that.
Trust building is a process. The leader has to trust that by doing this work, their business, their reputation becomes stronger. The leader has to trust that his or her people don't know, but can learn and can come up to speed with respect to cyber. And the leader has to trust that the client is going to reward them for making this investment. At the moment, many leaders see it as being a cost. I've got to eat the cost, is the prevailing mentality. Whereas the mentality should be the more I'm doing for my client, the more the client's going to respect me. And therefore, if I have a bit of a premium on my rate, the client's going to say, I understand what you're doing. You're doing it in my interest.
So that's interesting. So it's besides you're trying to work with the customer, your client, so that they can understand the value of investing in cyber. But
Absolutely.
then they're also need to also they're probably going to charge on the higher on the other end as well as downstream.
Yeah.
They need to be able to convey that too. So how do you educate them to the point where they can do that as well?
We share with them the work that they're doing. They need to share the outcomes. They don't, the client, their end client doesn't need to know how the sausage is made, but they need to know, the end client of theirs needs to know, we're doing this in your best interest. We have your data. Your data is worthy of protection. To this end, we're implementing these 5 things. Of course, the rate increase on their end shouldn't come at the same moment. But if you told your client these 5 or 6 features you're building in, this work you're doing, the client at the other end, when you do raise their rate, should realize, I want to stay with this guy. He's thinking ahead. He's doing something useful.
That's interesting. Like when we've approached that with clients, compliance has always been an easy, I wouldn't say easy, but a little bit of a cudgel
Yeah.
for financial companies. They have to do it. But then on the other end, when they're approaching a due diligence exercise, whether it's a regulator or more importantly, when it's they take it more seriously when it's an investor coming in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the investors tend to be more protective, of course, of their own data than sometimes the investment company is. Um, and it's almost like you're bridging around the client to their end client in some
Yes.
ways, that trust,
Yes.
that transfer of
One
trust.
has to connect the end client's interest and requests, because the financial advisor or the financial institution, their ear is much more attuned to the sound of their comments than it is to the sound of a compliance comment. When a compliance officer, if there is one, or a regulator says, thou must, it's like, yeah, well, whatever, I'll get around to it. Whereas when the client, the end client, the one who's putting $2 million with you or whatever, says, by the way, do you do these things? All of a sudden it's, do we do this? This is important. We got to do this to win the business. So when one speaks about the end client or makes reference to the fact that what one is about to do is more attractive to them, they wake up.
So we tend to work backwards from the question. How are you showing or demonstrating the value you're bringing, especially around data projects? I think sometimes data projects, it could be a little bit more difficult to demonstrate that what you're doing uh, is helping them or improving their security posture. How are you doing that?
We do it in a couple of different ways. First of all, we make them, well, I shouldn't say we encourage clients to recognize that data is like oil. It has serious value. And by the way, it can only increase in value. We cause them to realize how much data they have and how much they can use data for the client, again, for the client's benefit. So if you've got data and it's worthwhile, it's worthy of being protected. You don't just put $10,000 on the sidewalk and walk away. It has to be protected. You've got data, it has to be protected. So we try and speak in language and we try and help them to understand the value of what they've got from the client's perspective. Does your client appreciate it if that gets lost, that gets compromised, or that gets exposed? All of a sudden now it has more value. What we're saying has more relevance to them. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Yeah,
Okay.
that was great. So it's kind of walk me through what actually happens in the hours after something like a compromised credential, like the one you were doing with, or a successful phishing attempt. Where does the damage really show up first?
In many cases, clients get locked out of their system, and that creates a panicked reaction. That's the first thing we've seen on several occasions. The instinct then is to be afraid and to give in to whatever demands are being made of the organization or the person. Many people don't have an incident response plan, so they've not thought through that the very first thing I should perhaps do is to call my insurance company. Or the very first thing I should do is to unplug the internet so that no further damage can be done. Because they haven't thought through what the first step is, their first step is usually to panic. And we encourage people to move from being panicked, to being prepared with an incident response plan. So the strict answer to your question is people panic and do lots of crazy things, like give in and send money to strange places. Whereas what they should do is to step back, get the right help. You gotta get the right help because you've got no expertise in how to deal with this. Call a friend who knows what to do. Call the insurance. Do something sensible.
Yeah, it's similar to the idea of when we talk about with even individual cybersecurity. When if somebody is texting you and asking you to send money or to do something,
Mhm.
talk it through with a friend that's not an emotionally charged in the
Charged.
environment, and you can get even a better view of it, even separate from the having an expert in the room. Obviously, in this case, you want an expert in the room.
Right.
So
To
you're
add,
talking about it.
to add to what you forgive me, to add to what you've just said, we always try and say to people, anytime there's an immediacy, one must do this and do this now, stop. There's, no, there's nothing you have to do right now other than breathe.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mhm.
it's probably the first thing they should be doing is breathe.
Breathing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talked about the importance of incident response plan, having a plan in place. What do you determine should be going into that incident response? How do you find that out?
There's several standard things we advise in respect to an incident response plan. The first one of which is make sure you had insurance in the first place, because we don't think that many people can survive an incident without having had cyber insurance. The cost is just horrendous. People think, well, I just pay for the recovery of my systems. We had a situation a few years ago where an organization with about 90 endpoints was hacked, and they called us up and they wanted just a quick, this is the language, we need a quick estimate as to what it's going to take to fix these 90. And we went through a bit of a discussion with them, and our quote was in the six-figure range. And the leader fell off his chair and he said, why is it going to take so much money? And I said, how many files do you have per computer? He made a guess, and I said, "You're actually wrong. You probably have in excess of 7,000 files per computer. Times that by 90. How much software do you have per computer?" Again, he gave an estimate. It was wrong. It was about 3 or 4 times higher. And I just kept going through the list, and I kept saying, each of them has to be checked. You're asking me then to certify that each of these has been cleansed. There's no virus on it. How much time do you think that's going to take? At which point he said, I take your point.
And he probably didn't have cyber insurance in order to cover for that at that time.
He didn't. He didn't. So that's why I said the very first thing we do when people talk about planning, we say you got to get cyber. You got to get it before you get hit, because after you get hit, forget about it. Nobody's going to give it to you. And then people say, well, it costs so much. And I say, if you think 5,000 was too much to pay, let me tell you about the cost of not having it.
Yeah, cost of not having it,
Yeah.
more impact. Yeah, we take clients through a business impact analysis and identify um, how does data move through your business? How does money move through your business? Understand where your risks are,
Mhm.
and then in each step of the way, well, we've seen. I think you brought it up in one of your other uh, uh, podcasts that you were on, where many times with a small company, there's one person that's doing a particular activity, right? We identified that recently with a client of ours, and hey, okay, well, let's work through. We're going to need to redo your business continuity plan. Uh, what happens when, God forbid something happens, and then you have to deal with that event, and that God forbid something happens, we change the event around, almost kind of like a mini tabletop, and identifying that all of a sudden that one of their workflows is all going through one person. I said, well, okay, here's a problem. It's not a technical issue. It's like you have one human that's above, and that's unfortunately the reality for small companies that there's typically only one person that's doing a thing. I know it happens in our company.
Yeah. And I want to add to what you just said. We firmly believe that 80% of the time, there is a non technical challenge rather than a technical challenge. You just spoke about there being one person. And take that a step further. Have you trained that person? Would they happen to even know what a phishing attempt looked like? Take that a step further. We've seen this so many times. Do you have two names listed on, for example, the help desk when you call Microsoft? Do you have two names? There's so many times we see one name mentioned. Oh, right, that person has left the company. Nobody knows they even existed. You now need to call Microsoft, just as an example. Microsoft says, I don't know you. Yeah, you own the business, but I don't know you.
Yeah.
The name I have here doesn't match. That's what they say to you.
Yeah.
And you have no way of even reaching that person. That's not a technical issue. That's
That's so
something that
true.
you hadn't thought through because we didn't take the time to build a proper plan.
That's so true. We actually were early in my career. We were trying to help a small preschool, and exactly that same thing. It's like the person who had left, and in this case, I think actually the person had passed away. And now we were talking about sending copies of driver's licenses and passports and all sorts of things so that we can get access to
And that takes
their
weeks, and that can take weeks,
weeks, if not months. Yeah,
months.
absolutely.
And by the way, hacks going on at that time, you can't get help.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
We've had that in our firm where the CISO we had at that time, um, God rest his soul, he passed away one night. And next day it's like, okay, we gotta check. Luckily for us, we had more than one name on the account. So we weren't crippled by the fact that he was no longer with us. Yeah.
Right. So one thing that there's two parts to and usually what happens, we have the things, the activities that we do, in our world we call it left of boom, and then the things that happen right of boom, right?
I love that term.
So yeah, so we have the left of boom stuff. Those are the things that you talked about: creating an incident response plan, getting cyber insurance.
Mhm,
We talked about the things that happen right of boom,
mhm.
invoking the incident response, calling cyber insurance, understanding where do you identify, where do you typically see the gaps other than the ones that we've talked about between companies being truly prepared for something to happen, and then or the one where they are, and how do you get them to really invest in those changes to take place?
Preparedness is the key. Those who are prepared get through it because there's easily 20 or 30 things that need to be done to bring you safely to a safe landing on the right side of the boom. And in a panicked situation, many people haven't thought about it, don't do it. I'll give you a simple example: communication. Because everything's blown up, nobody's got a good communication plan if you're not prepared. So you don't know how to speak to your staff. You don't know the frequency with which you need to advise people. So everybody panics, and because everybody's panicked, everybody does their own thing that they think is right. And before you know it, you've got all these sets of activities that clash and have made the matter worse.
Yeah, communication is a key one, especially when it relates to talking to the outside world, who
Yep.
don't want every employee saying their own thing and their own story. You want to be cohesive in that way.
And one of the things we have noted to continue that trend of thinking, most businesses have probably 4 or 5 key clients. Imagine that you've got 4 or 5 staff members, each of whom has communicated something to one of those high value clients. By the way, all 4 of them created the wrong message. Within 10 minutes, that client's already made their mind up. If we get through this, I'm gone. So by the time we've seen this, the business gets back online, the client very calmly delivers the message. Jim, well, it's been nice working with you for the last 15 years, but I can't do it anymore. So even if they survive, they die because the big 4 have left.
So if the key is like, all right, so things happen, You can't prevent everything. There's no such thing as being 100% protected. Um, we see large companies go through the incident and muscle through. Some do well, some do not well. What have you noted in those incidents or through your clients to say, like, these are the people who are going to survive if something happens, or we already know that if something happens with these clients, they're just not going to make it because of their lack of preparedness or whatever? What lets them survive? What helps them actually survive on the other end?
Extraordinarily good communication. That's the absolute key to it. If you, for example, establish in your incident response plan a 30-minute communication cadence, every 30 minutes, we'll communicate with staff. Or if it's a key client, every hour, we'll communicate with you what's being done to, listen to the words, better protect your assets. What you then do is not only communicate calm leadership, but you have demonstrated your ability to work through a complex issue, and you ordinarily earn more respect from your team and from your clients on the other end of it. As I mentioned earlier, most of it's not technical.
Right.
Most of it needs to be done at the human level. And if you get that 80% right, the other 20% is usually easier to do technically.
Yeah, we've seen where if you even look at the public events, because it's harder with smaller companies that you don't know what the stories are unless you're in it. The public events, you see the ones that do really well. The example I use is when CrowdStrike had an incident last year where they affected a large number of businesses due to a failed update. So clearly a bad day for a lot of people that day. But you look at how they reacted, how well they reacted, what their kind of how they took it seriously, they were transparent. And then you look at some of the downstream businesses from them. Some reacted really well, some not so much. And to the point where it negatively affected that company. They didn't cause the problem.
Yeah.
Delta Airlines didn't cause their own problems
Nope.
being down, but the way they reacted to it is what caused their problem.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've seen that we've probably worked now with almost 200 SMBs, and the ones who do better are the ones who take that incident response plan and the communication section of the plan very seriously. We had a situation where a law firm got hit, probably 1,000 client files. They don't have 1,000 active clients, but they had 1,000 client files in their system. And what they did between the four of them was to say, you take this 250, and they worked the list through. They call people, they say, we've been hit. Here's what you need to do to better protect your systems. And maybe it took a few days, but by the end of it, and they recovered the situation beautifully, but by the end of it, many of the clients called back to say, not only did they say thank you, they say, we haven't heard from you in years, but having not heard from you, we saw how you dealt with it. You know what? We've got some business that we'd like to bring with you. They did even more business afterward than they did before. It's how you handle it.
Yep. It's amazingly true. We have a colleague who, like us, managed service provider in the area, was affected by one of their vendors. Their vendors was breached. That caused all of their clients to be ransomed. But it was how they reacted to that you could have easily that's usually a business ending event. Like, they're gone. Those clients are gone. And that wasn't the case. Not only was he able to protect the clients that he had, they started buying more from him, and he expanded his business.
And that's a wonderful segue into our underlying philosophy. I wrote a book, and the name of the book, Cyber Model Dividend. And we invoke the use of the word dividend because we believe that cyber is an investment. And just as you would buy a stock, you treat it as an investment, you would have done some research on it, you did some preparation, and you expect a dividend. When people invest in cyber, they rightly should expect a dividend. And that's a critical paradigm shift for many businesses.
So where in that thesis, what is the dividend of a cyber investment?
We just spoke about two of the dividends: increase trust with your end client, increased revenue because you've had an opportunity to communicate to your client that you can handle complexity. You are mindful of their data and the value of their data. And clients say, I'm going to keep working with you. Matter of fact, I like you even more than I did like you yesterday.
Yeah, I think if you're trial by fire and that happens, I think and hopefully you don't have to go through an incident like that in order to
Mhm.
be able to show the dividend beyond that. I think where well how we try to approach it, and I'm curious to see what your feedback is there we look at it as a hey, look, you are we work with investment clients. So you're a fiduciary for your clients' money.
Mhm.
You're supposed to take good care of their money. You're supposed to help them grow their money depending on your level risk profile and all that. I'm here to do the same for you.
Mhm.
So what's important is that I'm these are the things that we think that you need to put in place in order to lower your risk and so that you can be that fiduciary to your customer. Because ultimately, what is money? Money is our bits on a computer someplace,
Mhm.
right? And so if we're not able to protect that information from this or that, that's going to help them improve their ability to show that to your customers. I I think sometimes we lack the uh, imagination of how to explain that to customers and business owners in a way, especially small business owners. And so, I we try to narrow down to just like here are the core things that you need to do every
Mhm.
day. And these are the core things that all your employees need to, because it has to be everybody in the
Mhm.
business. It's not just one thing.
Agreed.
So you've compared cybersecurity spending across a portfolio. What does that look like for a business with a limited budget? Like where did they start? What's the smallest, cheapest step that a business owner can do in order to move their cyber program ahead?
The smallest step they can do is to appoint someone in their business as being the owner of cybersecurity in their business. Take somebody who's there, and the person should probably have three characteristics. Number one, they know people in the business, they can have the respect of those people, and they're methodical in what they do. You appoint someone and you say, you now own this. You wake up tomorrow morning, you're thinking about cyber, and little by little, you're going to get us to a better place. Appointing an owner of cybersecurity is probably the most important thing an organization can do. And it should, in most cases, be relatively inexpensive. If you don't have that person, you can hire someone to own the cyber function. That person then has the responsibility. They don't have to know much about cyber, but they have the responsibility quarter over quarter to build just a wee bit more. Think about investments once again. Most of us don't start out with a lot, but you know what? I bought $200 in stock last quarter. This quarter, I'm going to save and buy maybe 250 in stock and so on and so forth. And by the end of the year, I may actually have had 1,200 as an investment. But that investment pays dividends because not only are we learning, we're gaining momentum and the investment building. And so before you know it, 2 years later, you might have an investment that's worth 8,000 monetarily and of the cyber equivalent because you've taken these compounding steps. You now have an organization that's quote unquote 8 times more secure or has an investment, if you think of it financially, of 8,000 than you had 2 years ago. That's the kind of it. That's the kind of person you want. A person who will take ownership.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because especially somebody who may not necessarily understand cyber, that it's in the company. I think most small businesses will. they'll hire an IT firm or they'll hire a cybersecurity firm and say, yeah, they're responsible for that. I said, no,
No,
no, you're
no.
still
You are
responsible.
responsible.
Yeah,
They,
they're helping you
yeah,
fulfill the mission,
yes.
but you're responsible.
That firm that you hired may execute a specific portion of your responsibility. But I keep saying it, 80% of it's human. So, for example, you're doing some cyber awareness training for your team. You know what that owner would have done? That owner would have come around and said on Thursday morning, John, did you do your cyber training for the week yet? John, thank you. I didn't remember. Or because they're respected in the organization, they'll come around and say, John, you're taking me for granted here. You said it to me 3 times that you were going to do it. You haven't done it yet. Get on with it. None of that's technical, but it's absolutely critical to that business because you build a culture. That's one of the dividends. A culture of repetitive, good cyber hygiene leads to a fortified organization from a cybersecurity perspective.
So, just kind of something else that I thought of before we close out. One thing that we see is sometimes people will they spend money in areas that they think they're because of that they're protected, but perhaps they're investing in the wrong area.
Yes.
You brought this up yourself. Do you see do you ever see businesses say overinvest in certain areas or completely invest, and how should they allocate their cyber investments?
We see organizations who choose to spend on cyber misinvest quite often because they fundamentally did not understand that cyber is not an IT problem. So, because they're of the mindset that cyber is an IT problem, they're busy buying tool one, tool two, and tool three. They have heard from their friend, I use tool four. Oh, what do? Allow the salesman from that company to call them and persuade them that they now need tool four. And our comment is, you're not here to please the cyber salesman. You are here to defend and better protect your organization. So it's less about buying tools, more about leadership, understanding that it's a leadership matter, it's a business matter. And then because it's a business matter and less of an IT matter, we need to be talking about ownership. We need to be talking about a plan. We're not going to get it all done overnight. And then we need to put the necessary budget in place, not for tools, but for action on the continuum so that we can better protect the organization.
You're speaking from my my source material. That's amazing. That's we're completely aligned with that. So, as one like kind of one last thing, what's one thing that you want business owners listening to do differently next week?
I want them to understand the word model. Can't stress it enough. There's a model of operation. The model of operation starts with ownership. Once you've established ownership, you need to be thinking about investment. You're making a cyber investment. And once you think about an ownership and an investment, just like you would do with a financial investment, you pay attention to what that company is doing that you invested in. You're invested in cyber, you're now going to pay attention to what's being done. Suppose you invested in computer awareness training, which is very inexpensive. At the end of the month, you ask the question, who hasn't done the training? Simple question. But by the mere fact that you've asked the question, what do you think the organization's going to do? They're going to hurry up and do the training. And what does that do? That begins the protection. That begins the journey to being more cyber aware. It begins the fortification of your enterprise. It begins to build a culture. It begins to help you as an owner to say to your client, our people are becoming more cyber aware. We've done level one in whatever program it is. Your client's going to be happy to hear that news, and you make it part of the culture. And as you progress, yeah, you may need a tool here, multi-factor authentication, endpoint protection, all the rest of it, but those things aren't a huge cost.
Right.
It's the leadership that's the cost.
Yeah. Leadership is where it has to come from leadership.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Robert, thank you for joining me. How can people find you, TGT Solutions, and where can they buy your book?
They can buy the book on Amazon. They can find us on our website, tgtsolutions.com. And we are very open to having conversations because a cup of coffee, conversation doesn't hurt, but sure helps a lot when people begin to recognize that a little bit of thinking and a little bit of different behavior creates a whole investment. And a whole investment creates a whole set of dividends down the road.
Fantastic. Thank you, Robert, for joining me. We'll put links in the show notes for their book as well as how to get a hold of Robert. Thank you for joining us. And I appreciate you being on the Cybersecurity Cafe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.